Testing, testing. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for your patience. I am just announcing that we will officially begin in the next 5 minutes. Honorary for Ethiopia and Jamaica, Mrs. Yodi Tilton. Leslie Harrow, Executive Director of the Institute of Jamaica, who is also representing Entertainment and Sport, the Honorable Olivia Grange. Professor at the University of North Carolina, Greensboro, Dr. David Aarons. Members of the Consular and Diplomatic Corps, specially invited guests, ladies and gentlemen, students, good afternoon. My name is Briscoe, and I'm the Education Outreach Officer at the ACI, and it is my to open today's event titled Africa is Our Home, Reggae Music and Rastafari Expatriates in Ethiopia. This is an important initiative of ACIJ, GB, and the National Gallery of Jamaica. After all, it explores the ingenious and international world. Much to consider and discuss today, so I look forward to your full participation. Thank you. I will now invite priests to the Ethiopian Orthodox Church to lead us in prayer.
በስመ አብ ወመንፈስ ቅዱስ አሐዱ አምላክ። አቤቱ አምላካችን መድኃኒታችን ኢየሱስ ክርስቶስ ሆይ ለዚህ ዕለት መስከን ስላበቃህን ክብር ምስጋና ላንተ ይሁን። ዘመኑን የጤና የፍቅር ዘመን እንድታደርግልን እንለምንሃለን። ሀገራችን ጃማይካ ሀገራችን ኢትዮጵያ እንጠብቅልን እንለምንሃለን። ሁለትም ሶስትም ሆናችሁ በእኔ ስም በተሰበሰባችሁበት ትገኛለሁ ብለሃልና ተገኝተህ እንድትባርከን እንድትቀድሰን እንለምንሃለን። ፈጣሪያችን አቡነ ዘበሰማያት አባታችን ሆይ በሰማያት የምትኖር ስምህ ይቀደስ፣ መንግሥትህ ፈቃድህ በሰማያት እንደሆነች እንዲሁም በምድር ትሁን። የዕለት እንጀራችንን ይቅር በለን እኛም የበደሉንን፣ አቤቱ ወደ ፈተና አታግባን ከክፉ አድነን እንጂ መንግሥት ያንተ ናትና ክብር ምስጋና ለዘላለሙ አሜን። እመቤታችን ቅድስት ድንግል ማርያም ሆይ በመልአኩ በቅዱስ ገብርኤል ልሻለን፣ በሐሳብሽ ድንግል ነሽ፣ በሥጋሽም ድንግል ነሽ። አሸናፊ እግዚአብሔር እናት ሆይ ሰላምታ ላንቺ ይገባሻል። ከሴቶች ሁሉ ተለይተሽ አንቺ የተባረክሽ የማኅፀንሽ ፍሬ የተባረከ ነው። ጸጋን የተሞላሽ ሆይ ደስ ይበልሽ፣ ልዑል እግዚአብሔር ከአንቺ ጋር ነውና ከተወደደው ልጅሽ ከጌታችን ከመድኃኒታችን ከኢየሱስ ክርስቶስ ዘንድ ይቅርታና ምሕረቱን ለምኝልን ኃጢአታችንም ያስተሰርይልን ዘንድ ለዘላለሙ አሜን። ታንክ ዩ ቨሪ ማች።
Amen. Mrs. Roxanne Buckner, Senior Director at the National Gallery, to deliver today's welcome.
Good afternoon, everybody. There will be some repetition here, but the occasion demands. Mr. Leslie Harrow, Executive Director, Institute of Jamaica, representing the Honorable Minister Olivia Grange from the Ministry of Culture, Gender, Entertainment and Sport. Mr. Kalechi Opara, Senior, he is representing Her Excellency Dr. Maureen Tamuno, the Nigerian High Commissioner, Mr. Ronaldo Davila Goya, Second Secretary, Charge of Affairs, Cuba in Jamaica, Counsel, Mr. Luciano Bataglia, Deputy Head of Mission of the Argentinian Embassy. Mrs. Yodette Hilton, beautiful Yodette, Honorary Counsel of Abba Samuel Wadeha-React, Tel Ela, right? Priest in charge of the Ethiopian Church, Dr. David Aarons, lecturer at the University of North Carolina. At this point, I'd like to acknowledge his father, Dr. John Aarons, Mr. John Aarons, Ms. Nicole Patrick Shaw, Deputy Director, Institute of Jamaica, And a special welcome to Mr. Vivian Crawford, former Executive Director of the Institute of Jamaica, heads of division of the Institute of Jamaica, distinguished guests and friends, our online audience, ladies and gentlemen, welcome. Welcome to the National Gallery of Jamaica as we host, in partnership with our sister division, Caribbean Institute of Jamaica, Jamaica Memory Bank, this lecture entitled Africa Home, Reggae Music and Rastafari Repatriates in Ethiopia. Ongoing discussions were being held about forming partnerships with the National Gallery and the ACIJ, because as we recognize that as divisions, we work in tandem by using the gallery's vast holdings that through visual arts, varying cultural themes, and retain along with ACIJ in connecting Jamaica's cultural landscapes to the continent of Africa. So the timing of this lecture is fortuitous, as the National Gallery is currently hosting the Reggae International Poster Competition, which you see the posters downstairs among us. And this lecture has part of its focus, reggae music, and how this genre of music has contributed to the audibility and visibility of Rastafari in Addis Ababa. So ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us for this event, and do enjoy the rest of the program. Simple as that.
I now invite the following persons, Ms. Nicole Patrick Shaw, Deputy Executive Director of the Institute of Jamaica, who will deliver greetings on behalf of the Executive Director at IOJ, Mr. Leslie Harrow, followed by Mrs. Judith Hilton, Honorary Consul for Ethiopia, and then Mr. Leslie Harrow, who will deliver on behalf of the Honorable Olivia Grange.
Honorable Council, Ethiopian Honorable Council in Kingston, Ms. Judith Hilton, and other members of the Consulate and members of the Diplomatic Corps, Executive Director of Jamaica, Mr. Leslie Harrow, Dr. David Aarons and his father from the University of North Carolina, priest of the Ethiopian Orthodox Tel Wahido Church, Abba Tel Dela, specially invited guests, farmers, members of our board, members of the Institute team, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Today I have great pleasure in greeting you all on behalf of the Institute of Jamaica at such an important event that will help to enlighten us on the history and impact of a people known throughout the world for their zeal, courage, and connection to the motherland that transcends time and space. We all know the saying by our first national hero, the Right Excellent Marcus Mosiah Garvey, who declared, "We are going to emancipate ourselves from mental slavery. For though others may free the body, none but ourselves can free the mind." The theme of today's lecture is Africa is our home, reggae music and the Rastafari repatriates in Ethiopia, which when we think of nation, the very word means the return of descendants of enslaved Africans back to Africa, emancipating themselves, and this is at the very heart of the Rastafarian movement in Jamaica. Rastafarians, the world over, have lifted the culture and spirit of the Jamaican people, a catalyst for the voice of the oppressed through the genre of music we enjoy and love. Okay. Our beloved music icon, Bob Marley, Exodus, that today as it did 46 years ago when he prescribed to solving the ills of the world through revolutionary songs like this, spoke to leading Jah people out of Egypt to the land of freedom. The Institute of Jamaica supports the development of Jamaica's music throughout the nation and diaspora, and we a utopia, peace and freedom for all. Since the first slave ships arrived in the New World in the 16th century, enslaved Africans and their descendants have their African identities and the dream of their eventual return to their ancestral home. Our vision at the Institute of Jamaica is to continue to demonstrate through our initiatives and programs that our rich culture and heritage has on the worldwide through cultural universe. Symposia, lectures, and presentations such as this today, hosted by ACIJ-JMB, are imparting knowledge and the practices of our to our younger generation at the Programs Coordination Division. We are increasingly aware that the world is ever-changing, and strengthening the wisdom and knowledge of our will keep us rooted and grounded in the present. Africa is our beating heart. To Jamaicans coming to that realization. Once again, I salute Rastafarian brothers and sisters, and I join with you all in saying that the Rastafari and reggae will continue to influence societies from a musical and historical level. Let us continue the move as Jah one people.
Mrs. Judith Hilton.
ጤና ይስጥልኝ። I must speak my language first. Everybody welcome, and Abba Samuel, all dignitaries, good afternoon. በመጀመሪያ እዚህ በትልቅ በዓል ላይ በመገኘታችሁ እንኳን መጣችሁ እላለሁ። The reason that we are here today, this afternoon, is because Dr. David Aarons have done a marvelous job to connect both Jamaica and Ethiopia, so we have to salute him. Ladies and gentlemen, in a very positive way, Dr. I have been serving my country, Ethiopia, here in Jamaica as an honorary consul. Dr. Aarons is the first person I assisted to get a very special visa to go to Ethiopia and assisted. I'm sure you remember those days. It's been such a long time, but it feels like yesterday. The topic of his presentation is here today is of very interest of my personal interest, as I have walked the journey ever since I discovered reggae music as a child growing up in Ethiopia, and especially after living in the United States, being even more familiar with reggae music and Jamaicans in the States. Has led me to several visits to Shashamane and building a bond of friendship in the Jamaican and Caribbean community at home in Ethiopia, which lasted until today. I ended up marrying a Jamaican man. That is basically where I end up in Jamaica, Ethiopian connection again. Therefore, I agree with Dr. Aarons' main thesis that there is a need to a better collaboration between Jamaican and Ethiopian musicians. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to mention a couple who are with us here today who repatriated to Ethiopia. So we have an example. He is one of who lived in Ethiopia for many years and was significant part of the reggae scene in Ethiopia. His wife, my friend Saba, who is from Ethiopia has witnessed the early collaboration of Rastafarians and Ethiopians in repatriation of the music Rastafarian to Ethiopia. Please acknowledge Mr. Anthony Thomas, otherwise known as King Kong, both here in Ethiopia. Also, permit me to make mention of the significant work which was done by the Ethiopian government and myself as an honorary consul to grant a permanent resident status to the children and parents born in Ethiopia. Although the grants of the citizenship has not been achieved, their status circumstance has been greatly improved with the residency status. Please appreciate that the limitation of granting citizenship to a person not born of Ethiopian mother or both parents Ethiopians, this is one of the ways in which the government and the people of Ethiopia protected themselves from the foreign invaders centuries ago, who tried to colonize Ethiopian years ago. So one must appreciate that protection. Jamaican Caribbean members from the diaspora, a target of the framers of the Ethiopian constitution. Changing any constitution is always a very difficult task, and the government has been working from those centuries ago until now to amend that. We have chance in the future. Ladies, with these few words, I thank the presenter, Dr. Dance, the organizers, and the host of this very timely and fruitful event for helping to deepen the bond between the two beloved people and culture. We adore it. Thank you. I thank you. አመሰግናለሁ። እግዚአብሔር ይስጥልኝ።
Mr. Leslie Harrow.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am here representing the Minister, the Honorable Olivia Grange, Minister of Culture, Gender, Entertainment and Sport. And she would not pardon me if I do not recognize our guests, especially invited guests that are present. So forgive me. I want to recognize Council Mr. Keleachi Opara, Nigerian High Commissioner Mrs. Judith Hilton, Honorary Council for Ethiopia, Habasam, and I'll go to the last part of the name. He's in charge of the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, Mr. Ronaldo Davila Gallardo, the second secretary charge the affair of the Q High Commission in Jamaica, Council Mr. Luciano Batagali, Deputy Head of Mission of the Argentina Embassy. I want to recognize as well Dr. Jalani Naya, Head of the Rastafari University of the West Indies, Dr. Michael Barnett from the University of the West Indies, Senior Lecturer, Dr. Maria Smith, Program Coordinator, UNESCO, also a board member, Mr. Oliver Fagan, Chairman of the ACIJ, JMM. Want to recognize Small from the University of the West Indies, the former executive director of the Institute of Jamaica, the most authentic Portlander, Sir Vivian Crawford. I want to recognize as well Dr. David Aarons, our guest speaker, and I understand that your father and mother. First, because we have just celebrated Father's Day. So I was coming to the mother. So father and mother, they are both here. You are represented. I want to recognize also the director of the ACIJ, the man behind the planning here, Dr. Kurt Henry, and all esteemed guests that are present. I want to recognize the staff of the ACIJ, JMB, and also of the of Jamaica. And never leave out those who are entertaining us. Rastafari. An awareness, and this is from the ministry, awareness of our past is essential to the establishment of our personality and our identity. It is an immense pleasure to be presenting the Minister of Culture, Gender, Entertainment and Sport, who has progressively championed the development of Jamaica, cultural development and the enhancement of Rastafari brethren and those repatriated to Ethiopia. The history of Jamaica reggae music in Jamaica is synonymous with the rise of the Rastafari movement in our island. The original youth black faith in Trenchtown to Pinnacle and Backawall, the influence and close ties existing between the two have cemented their place in the global annals of culture, in that undeniable international musical mantra of one love, equally acclaimed sounds and songs by our legends, Toots and the Jimmy Cliff, Count Ossie, the Wiggles, Peter Touch, and all uniquely inspired by the rhythmic elements of Rastafari, Naya Binge. It was through the alchemy of all these elements that the Rastafari movement struggles, hopes, redemption, and liberation of Africa, specifically Ethiopia, alive. Beyond the popular culture and the first group of Rastafari brethren made the trip, starting with Jamaica's first government-sponsored mission to Africa in 1961 to investigate the possibility of repatriation, and the second mission to Africa, which was by Emperor Haile Selassie for several weeks in Addis Ababa, the Ethiopian capital. With such historical legacy in mind, the government of Jamaica, led by the Ministry of Culture in particular, has always remained proactive over the years in support of reggae music, inclusively upholding the rights of Rastafari communities. Our annual reggae events at home have increasingly attracted people across the diaspora. I can proudly state that when the government formally declared February to be Reggae Month, to move beyond showcasing reggae music as an aesthetics or interpretations of others, but instead to recognize and celebrate the genre of the music's enormous contribution to Jamaica's social, cultural, and economic. Our commitment to diversity and, if I may dare say, authenticity, saw the ministry spearheading a remarkable initiative that began in 2005 with members of the Rastafari community, resulted in groundbreaking exhibition mounted by the Smithsonian National Museum of Natural History, titled Discovering Rastafari. In 2007 or 2011. This was the first exhibition on Rastafari by and in any major museum that focused entirely on the essence of Rastafari, its liberty. And we continue to chant in the words of reggae musician, the great Burning Spear, "Oh Maya, Yard I am home." Let us remember that reggae music and Rastafari are a unity. I thank you.
I now hand over the stage to the drummers.
Africa, we want to go. Africa, we Africa, we want to Africa, we Come on, my black brother.
invite Dr. Kurt Henry, Director of the African Institute of Jamaica, Jamaica Memory Bank, to introduce his guest speaker.
Afternoon, everyone. And in the interest of time, I will dare to say all protocols observed. In a context where our ancestors were displaced from their families, communities, and nations, only to be transplanted in a foreign, the question has always been, how can we sing the songs of Zion in a strange land? And so for many years, as a people, we have been repatriating, whether metaphorically, through our worship, philosophy, dance, and in music. Today we have with us my friend and colleague, Dr. David Aaron, who will share with us how reggae musicians in Addis Ababa have used music to chronicle their exodus out of Babylon. Who is Dr. Aarons? Dr. David Aarons is a musicologist who specializes in folk and popular music of the Anglophone Caribbean. He graduated from the St. Augustine campus of the University of the West Indies in 2008 of music degree. In 2000, he completed a Master of Music degree in steel pan performance at Northern Illinois University. And in 2017, he earned his doctoral degree in ethnomusic from the University of Washington. His major research project is on Rastafari, who repatriated to Ethiopia and who used reggae music as a mechanism to construct and its various challenges, which I'm sure he will point out this afternoon. He currently lectures at the University of North Carolina, Greensboro. Without further ado, I welcome Aarons.
Okay, set a timer. Good afternoon, everybody. It's a nice dealing. Very glad to see everybody here. It is truly an honor. Thank you to Dr. Henry for inviting me. Thank you for the entire team, the whole crew of people who've made this happen. So I will not be able to list through all the special invited guests, but believe me when I say I'm very happy that you're here. Familiar faces, unfamiliar faces, certainly a lot of familiar names in the house. I appreciate everybody being here. So, I'm going to get right into it. Oh, okay. You can. Oh, okay. Well, I can go ahead and start. So, my talk today is on reggae music and Rastafari repatriates in Ethiopia. But before I get into it, let me just talk a little bit about why I'm talking, how I got into this, especially like how I'm a bald head and everything. So, first of all, Dr. Henry, as he said, I'm an ethnomusicologist. What this means, ethnomusicology can be thought of as the study of music in culture or the study of music and culture. So, human beings relate to music and sound and noise and how that factors into how they how they develop identities, things like that. And most ethnomusicologists rely on an ethnographic method of research, meaning that we're going out into a community, we're living with people, we're talking to people. Specifically, we're performing with people, so we're playing music together. And so the idea is that if you're playing music with people, you can better understand experiences to a certain extent. And so that's what I did. I first went to Ethiopia in 2014, and I went back again for about 10 months between 2015 and 2016. Visits in 2017 and 2019. I took my steel pan, which is not a typical, that's the only instrument I really can play. And so I took that and I performed with different reggae bands in different parts of Ethiopia. So I got to know musicians, both Rastafari and both non-Rastafari Ethiopian musicians as well. Let's see. So how did I get into this? I was doing my doctoral studies in Seattle, Washington, and this is important, just so you know how I got into this. And I was doing a class project on music in the Ethiopian Orthodox Church in Seattle. There's a very big Ethiopian community there. And so while I was going to this church asking people about the melodies that they're singing and when do they clap and do the girls ever drum or is it only the boys, the Ethiopians started to ask me, so why are Jamaicans in my country? I had no idea. And so that led me down to a series of questions about repatriation, but then also specifically about how music plays a role in the repatriation movement. So that's where I went to Ethiopia with those kinds of questions. But there are broader questions too, like how does music help people to develop a sense of home and belonging in another country? How does music help people to build community in the face of various kinds of challenges? And so those are some of the broader questions that I went into. Today, I'm thinking specifically about how the work that goes into creating and sustaining a music scene facilitates greater visibility and audibility for this repatriate community in Ethiopia. Also, how it facilitates a greater sense of belonging, especially because for a long time, many Rastafari repatriates in Ethiopia were undocumented. And even socially, they were perceived with ambivalence by Ethiopians, or sometimes even as a threat. The truth is that a lot of Ethiopians just didn't quite understand why Rastafari were moving there. One of the stories that I get a lot when I'm there, Ethiopians tell me, is that they believe that all Jamaicans love Haile Selassie because when Haile Selassie visited Jamaica in 1966, there was a drought in the land, and when he landed, the rain fell and the drought ended. And it's not quite true. Rastafari were worshipping and praising Haile Selassie long before he came to Jamaica. Apparently, it was raining on the day, and then when he landed, the skies kind of cleared, and so people were able to celebrate more. But just to say that there's a lot of people aren't really sure what to make of this community living in Ethiopia. So there's a lot going on there. All right, so I don't want to talk too much, so we're gonna go. Why don't we go? Oh, I have the power. I can do this here. I'm gonna go to the next slide. Okay, I want to start off with some videos and some music so we can see what's going on. This was a video I took early on in 2015 when I got to Ethiopia. This is a major festival, Taste of Addis. So it's a big festival in Addis Ababa. And on stage we have Ebony J, who is a Rastafari who repatriated to Ethiopia in 1999 from Manchester, the one in the UK, not the one here. And she grew up singing lots of different music, from reggae, she did hip hop, she does soul, R&B. In this particular example, she's singing one of her songs, Africa Unite, that she wrote. It's not quite reggae, but I think it's also important to demonstrate that not everybody wants to be limited by a specific genre. We're trying to connect with Africans more broadly. So it's like reggae, dancehall, rap, there's some Afrobeats in there. But pay attention to how she's engaging the crowd. She's singing only in English, but she's really engaging a crowd of mostly Ethiopians. This is when I just got to Ethiopia in 2015, so I was pretty amazed. So if I press this button, will it play? Jeff, you can press play for me, please? Yeah.
peace, love, and prosperity.
Sorry, I'm still figuring this technology. So that was Ebony J. This is another video that I took of Sydney Salmon and the Imperial Majestic Band. This is the band I performed quite a bit with when I was there. This is a different festival, but in the same location in Addis Ababa, in the capital of Ethiopia. And so this is one of the a lot. It's called Ethiopia Never Colonized. And so he's really appealing to this idea that, Ethiopia's never been colonized, and this is one of the reasons why Rastafari really have been looking to Ethiopia for a long time. It's a symbol of resistance against European, many other reasons. But he's very intentional. So Sydney Salmon was born in Jamaica. He was for a while and repatriated. And I'll talk about his band for a bit because it's a mix of Jamaican, Ethiopian, and people from other nations as well. But he's very intentional with his song. So he's going to start it off really so that everybody can hear the lyrics. He sings in English and he does Amharic sometimes as well. So he's learned the language. And then he's going to start off slow, and then when the reggae comes in, the reggae feel comes in, Ethiopian musicians, Dereje, who plays the guitar, is going to play and scales. That's very specific to Ethiopian music. And that's also because Sydney wants to have that Ethiopian sound fused with reggae as well, because he's to capture Ethiopian audiences, but also to demonstrate that he come together and work with Ethiopians and to develop a new sound as a repatriate. And there's something interesting that happens with some of the lyrics that he's saying. So pay attention to the words if you can. We'll talk about it a bit. Let me see.
Andamba and Utet. Ethiopia Tenantuna. Zare. What is the Lalem? Idolage. Tadia. Ethiopia never colonized. You don't know Ethiopia never colonized. This one from the ultimate challenge. All of them. You have to know Mama Ethiopia. Kemejem Netsa Netagarno. Idolende. Yeah, this one entitled Ethiopia Never Colonized is the edutainment. All the way from my man Sydney Salmon and Imperial Majestic. No offend out of business. Ethiopia real. Yeah. Ethiopia real Ethiopia. Tarikaya. Listen, let me tell you straight. So many nations may criticize, but Ethiopia has never been colonized, no. Youth, man, know yourself, know your culture, youths. It's your culture. Don't be surprised when they arrive to see the natural beauty and the sunshine. Yeah. In Ethiopia, so many different tribes. In Ethiopia, we've got so many different styles. But it's one Ethiopia. Oro, Amara, Walaita, Tigray, and Rasta. I said going on. Fikarachen, Andinetachen, Emnetachen, Hailachen. These are the reasons why Ethiopia can never be colonized. Nations may criticize, Ethiopia has never colonized. Don't be surprised when they arrive. The natural beauty and the sunshine. In Ethiopia. Olaita Tigre, Fikarachen, and the Metachen, Emetachen, Hayalachen, girl.
All right, I just wanted to play as much of it as possible because you can see the energy that's going on there. So in English, there are parts where he's singing Fikarachen, Andinetachen, Emnetachen, Hailachen, our love, our unity, our faith, our power. And he goes in between English or Jamaican or Patois or Jamaican and Amharic every now and then. Then there's one line important to what I'm talking about here today is when he lists the different tribes that are in Ethiopia. In Ethiopia, there are many different styles. In Ethiopia, there are many different tribes, and he lists some of them. Oromo, Amara, Walaita, Tigray, and then he says Rasta. In asserting that Rastafari is a tribe of Ethiopia. And we'll talk a little bit about why that kind of fits in with this whole talk in a bit. Let me go on to the next, see if I can. All right, so I'm talking a little bit about the creation of this reggae scene in Ethiopia, because here we have these two performers in Addis Ababa. They repatriated to Ethiopia, and they're on pretty big stages in Ethiopia. You don't just walk into a country and say that you're a musician on stages. There's a lot of work that goes on in this, and this is 2015, 2016. It's been years in the making for this to be able to happen, and so I want to acknowledge the work that different people have been doing in Ethiopia to make this happen, and what we learn from this whole scenario. So when I think about the Rastafari repatriates in Ethiopia making a scene, or making the reggae scene, one of the things I think about is the conviction. That's very important. They're sure in their belief that Ethiopia is a place where they should repatriate to. They're sure in their belief that Jah will help them to succeed, to spread a message of Rastafari spirituality and Pan-Africanism. So conviction is really important. They also come with having to navigate things like sound, because if you're making a scene with music, then you have to really think carefully about what kind of sounds you're going to produce. What are the lyrics that you're going to emphasize when you're in Ethiopia? For instance, you find that, as I've found that not many Rastafari who've repatriated are going to emphasize too much about marijuana in Ethiopia, specifically in public, right? There are strict marijuana laws over there. Language, are you going to sing in English or are you going to sing in Amharic? What are the decisions you're going to make there? Instrumentation, are you going to try and bring in Ethiopian musical instruments? Some people do, some people don't. There are different reasons for that. And then equipment. A lot of reggae music has a lot to do with sound system and big speaker boxes, and that didn't exist in Ethiopia for a long time. So people had to either bring it in, which is expensive, or build it in Ethiopia. So lots of different considerations there. Collaboration is really important, and we're talking about this. Sometimes we see a performance and say, wow, people are just working together, it's great, but there's so much that goes on behind the scenes. In those two examples I showed, we had repatriates, but also Ethiopian musicians as well, and that's necessary. But then we have to think about how do people collaborate in rehearsal settings. There are language barriers. There are barriers in terms of music upbringing. For people maybe in Jamaica who grew up playing music, maybe you're used to the one-drop reggae, but not everybody who grew up in Ethiopia learning Ethiopian traditional music or maybe classical music can quickly feel reggae in the same way. So there are some barriers there that have to be worked out. There are also power differentials that we have to consider with collaboration. And this is, it is interesting because on the one hand, a lot of repatriates, especially when they went there, things have changed now, but while I was there, many were undocumented. And so if you want to start a reggae band and you want to book things and you want to earn money, you have to have an Ethiopian band manager or somebody who can manage everything and communicate to nightclubs. So you need to find someone who can communicate in Amharic your vision and deal with finances. So there's a lot of trust that goes on in this whole process. And so it's possible that somebody who is undocumented could get taken advantage of in the situation. On the other hand, Rastafari come to Ethiopia with the skill of being able to speak English, which is really important. So a lot of Ethiopian musicians will want to play with them because they can develop English. Rastafari musicians also come with the knowledge of how to play reggae music, which is a global genre, and there's a certain amount of cultural capital there. That's a fancy word, but if you are able to play reggae music, you can go on any stage in the world. And if you're able to learn from somebody who has expertise in reggae music, but not just that, but somebody who is steeped in Rastafari culture, then you are more authentic as a reggae musician. So in some ways, Rastafari have an upper hand in some ways, and in other ways, they're vulnerable to some of the laws. Things have changed recently with residence permits and everything like that. But this is just something to keep in mind, that collaboration is always tricky. Consistency. If you want to create a scene and be out there, you can't just do a show today and 2 years later. You have to keep going and finding new venues and new spaces. So it's a lot of work. You have to come with expertise and understand space, like where you're going to perform and how you're going to transform space. So these are just some things to keep in mind. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the different ways that Rastafari Repatriates do this, and really want to get to a point where we can have questions and comments, because I'm really looking forward to hear that. What questions or comments you might have? Oh, let me go back. All right, just quickly about some background, because I've been talking about Rastafari repatriation. Oh, you can't really see the map. It's okay. So a central tenet of Rastafari is that repatriation is important, going to Africa and to Ethiopia specifically. And so how did this actually happen? For a long time, Rastafari have been singing about going to Ethiopia, going to Africa, but people are actually there. So here's kind of a shortened version of the story. In the 1930s, Italy invaded Ethiopia and occupied it very briefly. During that time, Haile Selassie was seeking support from people in the West for this invasion. He helped to set up the Ethiopian World Federation. See him as a god, but also people hate him, because there are some Ethiopians who hate him. So that's tricky, right? Not everybody. And of course, marijuana is associated with Rastafari. Lots of people know this. But even when I was in Ethiopia, people would say, oh, all they do is just do drugs and give our children drugs as well. So there's that stereotype that Rastafari had to overcome in Ethiopia as well. So lots of different challenges, including not being documented. There are more people in Addis who are likely to pay money for reggae performances, right? So there's that as well. Lots of things to think about. So Addis Ababa, population of about 5.5 million people and growing. It's a really big city. Hewan Seman Marye, she writes about popular music in Addis Ababa, and I think one of the things that she says is important that I'm thinking about. She's saying that non-elite and urban youth, Ethiopian youth, are using music, popular music, to redefine what it means to be Ethiopian in response to this system of ethnic federalism. And Addis Ababa is a good place for this. So I'm going to emphasize this a bit because to show why I'm focusing on Addis. So Ethiopia is a federation of nations, nationalities, and peoples. That is how in 1995, I believe, is when that was decreed. There are over 80 different ethnic groups in Ethiopia, so different languages, different music traditions, different cultures, different religions, different belief systems, over 80 of them. So it's quite diverse. And so the government is trying to do this thing where it's one Ethiopia, but recognizing the cultural differences as well. And this is controversial. Some people like it, some people don't like it. On one hand, you can't achieve unity if you're recognizing all of these different things, but on the other hand, if you try to focus only on unity, then those other groups kind of disappear, right? So that's what's going on. So that's why when Sidney Salmon was singing, in Ethiopia, there's so many different tribes, but there's one Ethiopia. He's doing that very thing of ethnic federalism. One Ethiopia, but different tribes. And that is how Rastafari can assert themselves as one of the tribes of Ethiopia. It fits perfectly well with this idea of ethnic federalism. And Addis Ababa is perfect for that because lots of the different ethnic groups, they live in different parts of Ethiopia, but in Addis Ababa, they're just all there. And so this is where you can assert your own identity, what it means to be Ethiopian, while acknowledging that you also have this other tradition as well. So Addis Ababa is pretty important. All right. So I would say that this reggae scene really got going in the early 90s. That's where I'm starting, and I think it's important to know that there are lots of people who've been a part of this movement, lots of repatriates, but also Ethiopians and people who were able to work together. So why did the early 90s, why was that the time when reggae music really started to get popular in Ethiopia? Major reason is that between 1974 and 1991, the Derg regime was in power in Ethiopia. This was the communist or the dictatorship regime. They were very strict on nightlife. They were strict on music. They were censoring musicians. Musicians, a lot of musicians left Ethiopia during this period. People talk about stories even today that lots of family members were disappeared within that period, so it was sometimes called the Reign of Terror. So when the Derge regime ended in 1991, thereabouts, that's when reggae music was able to come back more. Actually, I think it's this one. Into Ethiopia. So one of the first big nightclubs that started was called the Ram Jam nightclub. And the Ram Jam nightclub was started by two repatriated Rastafari, Gladstone Judah and Reuben Kush. Reuben Kush is still there, so I was able to speak to him. And they acknowledged that this was just the best time to start because no nightlife was opened up and you could do lots of different things. So they had a club and they were able to play reggae music. Now, what Raskush was telling me was that when he got there, it was like UB40, Red Red Wine, Bob Marley, One Love, just those kinds of things. But you're building a repatriation movement. You also want people to be aware of the Dennis Browns and the Peter Tosh and the Garnet Silk. And so they were able to get a club and control the kind of music that they could play to try and expose Ethiopian audiences to broader reggae music styles. So that was really important. But what was also important about Ram Jam and some of these early nightclubs and people like Reuben Kush and Gladstone Judah was that they brought Ethiopians on board as well. And so they trained Ethiopian musicians in singing reggae, but also in selecting and working sound systems. There was one particular Ethiopian, Raskesh, who was from northern Ethiopia, which is today Eritrea, and he acknowledged that he got a big start in his sound system in this nightclub here with Repatriates. And he has one of the big sound systems in Ethiopia today, a Baba Janoi sound system. Johnny Raga is a famous Ethiopian artist right now, and he also got his start kind of working with some of these repatriate musicians. Coffee House was another major venue, and I'm going to play a bit of Teddy Afro's song because it's hard to talk about reggae in Ethiopia. We're talking about Teddy Afro. Teddy Afro started singing in the coffee house at a nightclub, but also repatriated Rastafari were singing there as well. And so even though Teddy came into reggae music in his own way, he was also watching Rastafari musicians perform reggae. And lots of Rastafari musicians have told me that, yeah, he saw us singing this song, and it's when we started to say things like dubwise and rhythm, and it's when the Ethiopians started to do it. So they were kind of learning from each other. This song I'm going to play here, this is Gormawi Neto. It is a song about Haile Selassie that Teddy Afro sings with Johnny Raga. One of the first major reggae songs where an Ethiopian is now singing about Haile Selassie. Remember I said it's kind of complicated, how do you praise Haile Selassie in Ethiopia? But they did it really early on. And there's lots of interesting things here. First of all, they don't mention Haile Selassie as a god. They mention him as a really good king, as a great man, as a leader of Pan-Africanism. They're also talking about Jomo Kenyatta as well, so it's not just Haile Selassie to show that, it's Africa. But what's interesting is they're using words like Selassie and Rastafari, which is, Ethiopians wouldn't say Selassie. Selassie isn't a name by itself in Ethiopia. It's Rastafari who will use the word Selassie. And even the I at the end, that's a way of speaking, a Rastafari way of speaking, right? So when they're doing that, you can show that they're not just singing from an Ethiopian perspective, they're also aligning with Rastafari to certain degrees. And this is one of the songs that they were performing back in this club in the late 90s. And so really bringing Ethiopian audiences into understanding more that it's okay to sing about Haile Selassie and praise Haile Selassie. Jeff, you want to press play, please?
Yeah. All those documents have been burned. Them roads that people talk rumors have been learned. Because that's how we concern. Very future. Africa, Aradatawa Tufa Piasa, Kadamawi, Studambasa, Kadamawi, Studambasa. Girmawi Neto, Girmawi Nato, Yatindarase, Rase, Africa, Alba. Back to the father. Haile Selassie. You have to know that.
All right, so he's singing a lot about the titles of Haile Selassie. He's saying Ambassa Yehuda a lot, Lion of Judah, Yafrika Abat. Before he says Haile Selassie, he says Yafrika Abat, Africa's father, or father of Africa, Haile Selassie. Very strategic in how he does it. He's singing, the next verse he goes into Jomo Kenyatta. That's what I need to say. Now I want to skip to the end where Johnny Raga, who's also from Ethiopia, starts to DJ.
Almighty Father, Him and the rule of the nation. So I'll be happy to give thanks and praise to everyone. United we stand and divided we fall. Listen how we say, well, Selassie, I call and listen, Selassie. He led us on the right away, Selassie. Starting for him every day, Selassie. They put your people up with me, Selassie. They can't deceive no more than when we sing. Long time me tell them, they never want to listen. They walk with message of John, they must win the battle. They man the responsible, make me nice and comfortable. Selassie, I Father, heard him like Almighty Father, Him and the rule of the nation. So I'll be happy to give thanks and praise to everyone. United we stand and divided we fall. Listen how we say, when Selassie I call.
All right, and this is Johnny Raga DJing. And it's because he spent so much time with Jamaicans in Shashamane. He told me he'd go there all the time. He would work with Jamaicans. He would eat in the restaurants. He would talk. No, he doesn't believe necessarily that Haile Selassie is God, but he said he believes in Rastafari philosophy and culture and the Africa, black liberation, all of that. Just that one little component is a bit tricky, but for everything else, he seems to be quite on board. And a lot of repatriated Rastafari talk about how important like songs like this, and specific this song is, because it's all in Amharic for the most part, and it's helping Ethiopians to make connections between why somebody would want to worship Haile Selassie, right? So really important work. Listening to it, you might not know behind the scenes how much collaboration, how many years of repatriates and Ethiopians were working together in various contexts for this to happen. So that's important. I'm listening to this, and towards the end, I'm hearing Teddy Afro singing. He says Rastafari, but I also hear him saying Rastafari, at this like alternating, which is interesting to me because then he's making the connection between Rastafari, who was the man. So before Haile Selassie was crowned emperor, he was Teferi Mekonnen. And so he had a title called Ras, and Ras is like a governor of a province or something. So he was known as Ras Teferi. And so in 1930, when a group in Jamaica took on the name Rastafari, they were taking on the name of Haile Selassie before he was crowned. And so to me, Teddy Afro is making the connection between the man Rastafari and the Rastafari movement, which is really important in Ethiopia, for Ethiopians to hear these connections. So what I'm trying to say here is the repatriate movement in Ethiopia is helped by reggae music, not only just by repatriated Rastafari performers, but also by Ethiopians as well. And it didn't just happen organically. There was a lot of work and collaboration going on as well. And this is one of the things that I think is evidence of that. A few other things of note. There was a huge concert in 2005, and this is too much to talk about today, but it was really important. The Africa Unite concert. This was organized by Rita Marley and the Marley family. So they spent a lot of money, they got a lot of funding, and Rita took a whole team to Addis Ababa and had a free concert, a huge free concert in a public space to celebrate Bob Marley's 60th birthday. And it wasn't just a concert, it was symposiums, this was all kinds of different things, workshops. It was a long period of time, and they went from there, they went to Shashamane, they went all over the place. A lot of people to this day, in Ethiopia talk about, they remember going to this concert and how amazing it was. Government dignitaries were there. So this was important because now reggae music and Rastafari are on a major stage in Ethiopia. And it's not just Rastafari musicians, but Rastafari celebrity musicians. Rita Marley, Bob Andy, Marcia Griffith, Junior Gang, Stephen Marley, they were all there performing. Major thing for Ethiopia. Erin McLeod, who writes about Rastafari in Ethiopia, calls this a watershed moment for the repatriation movement because it really showed people that Rastafari can be peaceful, that they're promoting African unity, and that they can exist here. The government can accept them. So this was really important. On the other hand, there were some people there, some Ethiopians, mostly of the Pentecostal Christianity, who were very concerned about this. Oh, they're promoting their ways to our young people, they're promoting drug usage, they're promoting dangerous spirituality. But for the most part, a lot of Ethiopians really enjoyed this. I was trying to get some video, but I didn't get to download the whole thing from YouTube. So that was what that was. But what was interesting was like when Bob Andy and Rita Marley were singing, the band that backed them were repatriated musicians, people who had moved to Ethiopia long before, and so they already had their instruments and they were able to perform with them. So it's really special because not many of those musicians might not have gotten a chance to perform with such major reggae artists had they not moved to Ethiopia as well. And so that also raises their credibility because they're on a stage with Rita Marley, right? Going through a few people, there are too many people who are involved in this reggae movement, but I'm going to just talk about a couple, just so you have a sense of the different ways that people have been participating in creating a reggae scene in Ethiopia. So Dr. Desta Megu, she was the managing director of the Bob Marley Foundation. So she was a major player in getting that concert in Addis Ababa. She grew up in Jamaica, she studied in Florida, and then she took on this role and she helped to put on this big concert in Ethiopia. When she got there, she said, there's too much work to be done. Look at how well people are receiving us, but this can't be it. There needs to be more. And so that same year, she went back home, packed up her things, and moved back to Ethiopia. She's been there ever since. She started a children's village in Addis Ababa. So she was working to develop artistic talent in Ethiopian youth, visual arts, drama, music. She was also managing different artists, because she has experience as an artist manager. She's worked with Calypso Rose, and also like reggae musicians as well. So that kind of expertise is also important. You need people who have managerial expertise, people in the arts, and somebody who also has vision to be able to help children, right? She's now curating art exhibitions in Addis Ababa, and she writes in a newspaper as well. So this is one of the ways that like a reggae scene or an art scene, let's call it that, can really help to give Rastafari more visibility. Okay, so the Imperial Majestic Band, I spoke about them first, and there are just a few people I want to highlight just to get a sense of their journey to repatriation. So it's the Imperial Majestic Band. They also operate as the 12 Tribes of Israel Band for celebrations and devotions and things like that for the 12 Tribes of Israel in Ethiopia. Sidney Salmon is the lead singer. We heard him sing earlier. He grew up in Jamaica, was in the US, went to Ethiopia to perform in 2001 for a celebration. It's a whole story. He saw the World Trade Center falling and said, that's it, Babylon is falling, Ethiopia is calling. And he moved to Ethiopia that same year and started working with this band. Alton Ricketts is the drummer. I don't know if you can see, this is Alton. Alton is from Spanish Town. He moved to the UK. He started performing with different bands in the UK, and then he also moved to Ethiopia in 1999. And he brought his drum set with him. He didn't know exactly what he was going to do, but he knew that repatriation was important, and he knew that as a musician, he had an important role to play. This is something that I've heard a lot of musicians, repatriated musicians, talk about. Can't remember what that psalm is, but and the musician shall be there as well, leading. And so a lot of musicians were really focused on that. Next to Alton is Ma'an Judah. Ma'an is Filipino-American, so she was born in the Philippines and moved to LA. And she got into music on the West Coast in LA and then moved to Ethiopia in 2001. She plays keyboard. And even Ma'an was telling me, she She kind of got more into keyboard when she got to Shashamane. She was into music a bit, but the 12 Tribes band needed a keyboardist, so she was kind of working it out. And now she got the chance to perform with Bob Andy and Rita Marley. You know, it was a major thing. She's really well known because she's had to play the key, if any keyboardists are in here, she's had to play the keyboard part for reggae and the bass line at the same time because it's hard to find bass players who can vibe with the band. So she's really famous in the band for her abilities to do things like that. And I'll mention Helen. Helen Legas is an Ethiopian band member. She's been there for a long time. And so she lives near to Shashamane, and she would go to some of the events that Rastafari would put on. And eventually she just found herself going more and more and loving it. And then so she would go to rehearsal, she started to sing. And she said the more she spent time with the Rastafari musicians, the more she understood. Like she said, she started to read her Bible more. She started to understand more about Haile Selassie. She started to understand more about the 12 tribes of Israel, the different tribes and how that whole system works. And so she now identifies as Rastafari as well. So this is one band in which you really see a lot of people coming together and working together. And on one hand, she sings songs in Amharic for the band. She also helps Sydney with his pronunciation of Amharic, maybe helps to translate some songs as well. And she's also learning reggae from them. So it's a whole cultural exchange happening in rehearsal rooms. And I've spent quite a bit of time in some of those rehearsal rooms and watching these exchanges happen. So it's really important to know these things happen. Here is the Imperial Majestic Band. They're performing with a masinko. A masinko is a traditional Ethiopian instrument. It's a fiddle that is used by the Asmari people. It's a whole different tradition of singing and playing music. But Sydney wanted to incorporate this Ethiopian traditional instrument into reggae music to kind of demonstrate that, you know, we're coming together and to appeal to different Ethiopian audiences. So let me just show you a little video of this. Actually. All right, so this is one of the ways that you can actually see the collaborations happening on stage and hearing some of the fusions. And it wasn't easy. I was in some of those rehearsals, and Asrat is an accomplished masinko player, but reggae music demands certain types of melodies and certain types of scales. And what he's used to is specific kinds of scales and specific kinds of melodies. And so bringing it together was quite a challenge. In this video, he's kind of improvising and just working by himself, as opposed to have to like learn the different melodic lines that were already composed, because that could be a bit tricky. So they found a way to make it work, which is an important part of the process here. Oh, one more person here. Well, actually, I have two more. I, Timothy, and why I want to highlight I, Timothy, is he came from the US. He has a background in radio and communication. So he was on the radio in the US. He did a lot of poetry. So when he got to Ethiopia, he was able to work as a radio disc jockey. So he was able to promote reggae music on the radio. And so that's an important part of the scene as well. So not everybody can sing, or well, maybe he can. Not everybody is trying to sing or play an instrument, but you also need people in the media as well to be able to get audiences from that side. Because he had this experience, it wasn't too hard for him to get his reggae show. It was called Reggae Boat Ride, and it lasted for quite some time. And he was able to play like the Garnet Silk, the Dennis Brown. He was able to talk about Pan-Africanism and some history as well. He had to be very careful how he did it, but he was able to do that. And so I think this is an important aspect of the building of a reggae scene and gaining more visibility for Rastafari Repatriates. And then I think I'm ending here with Ras Quintasab, yes. Okay, this is the last person I'm focusing on. It doesn't mean that there aren't others who are very important as well. Yeah, man, I'm soon done. Oh, you don't. Ras Quintasab repatriated in about 1997. He was born in Trinidad and Tobago, so he grew up with calypsos. He grew up with Trinidad folk songs, but also reggae. He lived all over the place. He left, when he was living in Canada, that's when he made the final decision to repatriate. And so he told me, and he tells everybody, at the airport, he took off his shoes in Canada in 1997, and he's never worn shoes since. He's been walking around Ethiopia barefoot the entire time because Ethiopia is holy land, and it's a sign that he has arrived in the promised land. And I performed with him quite a bit as well. Now, in about 2018, 2019, Mrs. Yodi was talking about this, the Ethiopian government started to issue residence permits for a lot of repatriates. And this was a very complicated situation. I can't emphasize that enough. Repatriated Rastafari, the community, they came with different passports. It's not just Jamaicans, it's Jamaicans, people from the US, people from Trinidad, people from the UK, people from France, lots of different nationalities there. So it's hard to create a policy that can work with everybody. Some repatriated Rastafari came in and got jobs, so they were able to work with a permit. Some came and overstayed their time. Some of them married Ethiopians, some did not marry Ethiopians. So there are different paths to status and citizenship and all that, and so it's really complicated for this entire thing. The government, they can't just say, well, we'll give it to everybody who identifies as Rastafari. How do we deal with that, right? So in 2018, 2019, a lot of repatriates were granted residence permits, which is very important. Now they can move around more freely, they can do more things. I spoke with Ras Quintasab about this in Shashamane, 2019, and he said he looked at the card and he did not say citizen. He wanted to see the word citizen. And so he held out and went through a lot of application processes, and I don't know how it happened. But last year, he came out with this song, Ethiopian Citizen, because he's now an Ethiopian citizen. So he found a pathway to it. And of course, as a musician who chronicled his way out of Babylon, chronicles his experiences in Ethiopia, he's going to chronicle this new thing as well. So I wanted to end with his song, Ethiopian Citizen.
The ancient Kion River, the Nile. Ethiopia. I'm an Ethiopian subject, I'm proud of it. I don't carry no burden of shame. I'm an Ethiopian citizen, I'm proud of it. I chant in the Emperor's name, yeah.
And I should just say, Ras Quintasab, on top of everything else, he's well known in Ethiopia as a musician who has also trained a lot of Ethiopian musicians. So many musicians in Ethiopia who are reggae musicians have passed through his school of music, as what people talk about. Guitar, bass, all of it. He's teaching a lot of people. So he's done a lot of work over the many years. So these are some examples of just the different ways that Rastafari have used music and collaborated with people to create a reggae scene that, the reggae scene didn't grant anybody citizenship or status. I don't want to overstate the power of music. But by performing and creating this scene in Addis Ababa, I really do believe that this is a major role that helped the government to make decisions, to keep Ethiopia in the public mind, to warm Ethiopians to the Rastafari community through reggae music. And Addis Ababa was an important part for that. And this is bigger than, to me, this is bigger than just, where repatriation is very important and it's big, but it also shows Pan-Africanism, the individual one-on-one, like what it means to work with people on the continent. And they're demonstrating that. They're overcoming the challenges and they're doing it in many, many, many different ways. So let's leave it there and see if we have any questions or comments. Yes.
I'm curious if you looked as far back as Rabbi Arnold Ford.
Oh.
The fact that he was a musician himself, and his interaction, even the fact that his children got Ethiopian citizenship.
Yeah.
Way back in the 30s. So
Yeah.
before the 60s and you can hear, right?
For the YouTube, yeah.
Rabbi Arnold Ford,
Right.
who was Marcus Garvey's musical director, and who was one of the first repatriates in the early 30s. In fact, he got there before the Italian invasion, died during the invasion, but his wife stayed there, Minion Ford. His children were born there. But, you know, he was a huge musician in Harlem. And it's also because of people like him and Rogers and Garvey why the movement is referred to as Rastafari. You know, because there was a lot of press about Haile Selassie before his coronation.
Right.
So I'm just curious if, you know, in your research in terms of the music and the connection, if you went back that far.
So, Julia Bonacci wrote a whole long history, Exodus, Heirs and Pioneers, the history of Rastafari repatriation to Ethiopia, and she goes into the Fords in more detail. While I was there, Abbey Ford was there, his son. He was performing regularly in a jazz club. I didn't see him interacting with reggae musicians as much. I saw him mostly in jazz contexts. But his work is very important, and so are they, but I guess to say that I didn't go into that too much because
You know, Abbey is more Ethiopian than Caribbean.
yes, because he spent his time there. And of course, there's the Ethiopian Universal Anthem that's still sung regularly. So that connection is very strong there. And it's even stronger because they know that the Fords were actually in Ethiopia. So there's some ways that I've been thinking about it, but I guess I haven't gone into it like too deeply. But yes, I appreciate that's very important because their work was also very important to this as well, even though it wasn't specifically reggae, but it was music. And music was a part of the movement from the... Exactly, yes. Thank you. Let me get here then.
Yeah, the reason why the movement named Rastafari movement, because Makonnen, the father of Tafari, and Menelik, him cousin, the emperor, them used to send mission to the Caribbean, Mexico, and North America from the 1800s. You didn't aware of that?
Something about that, but not the details, no.
What about it?
That it happened, but I don't know the details.
And Rastafari used to support the UNIA. Tafari used to support the UNIA. And him sent some delegate to the first convention of the UNIA in 1920. And he told them, don't get up and take the mic. Like how I take the mic and Steve take the mic. He told them, do not get up and take the mic. Wait until the intermission and intercept Marcus Garvey. You know, when you pull somebody coattail, walking through and you pull him coattail and say, and then give him 2 envelopes. Tafari. Tafari sent 2 envelopes with the delegate to the 1920 convention. One with money, one with certificate of money, gold, and one with certificate of land title. I heard about it when I was 18-year-old, and I get to talk with Mrs. Garvey, and she writes it in her book too. But I get to talk to her when I was 18-year-old, 1966 to 1968. And she tell me the same thing, say, ask her why it was not publicized. Even though Tafari told them not to get up in the convention, so it mustn't be publicized there. She said Garvey chose not to publicize the gifts and the contact because it was concentrating on Liberia. And the music is involved in all of this. That's why they sing about the song in Ethiopia. They sing about Ethiopia and Liberia in that song, if you listen it back. And Garvey and the UNIA was concentrating on Liberia. The Liberian government did grant them some land. They had ships in the harbor there, and the Firestone Company, and Wilson, the president, and other president undermined the UNIA, and the same land that was to be given to the UNIA was given to Firestone, and the ships were seized. Am I talking the truth, people? And the ships were seized, and some leftists, because the leftists always have a clash with the Gavi. When I say leftists, I mean some of the doctrinaire leftists. Some of the doctrinaire leftists, I am not against them, but some of the doctrinaire leftists used to impersonate representing Ethiopia and used to impersonate representing the Gavi movement when it suited them, and was collecting money. That's why the Ethiopian World Federation was formed, because they were collecting money in the name of Ethiopia in America. Haile Selassie knew of it, and I'm sending him, I don't want that color.
But I appreciate that. This is Judith. Oh. He's giving it to you.
So my question has a lot to do with the Ethiopian instrument, the
Oh.
traditional instrument. You did mention about masinko. We have a lot more traditional instruments, kabero, bagana, and
Krar.
krar, washint, and many more. So what do you think, you did also mention the challenges that the Jamaican musician has in working with those musicians, playing the Ethiopian instrument. What do you think can be done to streamline that with the reggae music and to take it to the mainstream? Because that is something that I'm very interested in seeing in the future.
Yeah, thank you for that. So the masinko was that fiddle instrument that you saw playing. The washint is a flute. That also, I've seen that also used with Sydney Salmon. Some instruments are maybe not as acceptable. The bagana is used in Orthodox worship ceremonies or scenarios, and maybe not the most appropriate for secular music. I heard of an example of somebody, a Rastafari there, who tried to play the bagana on stage, and Ethiopians were very angry because it's supposed to be within church context. So that's also one thing to pay attention to, like which ones are acceptable and which ones are not. I think more and more now, there's so much more fusions going on in Ethiopia that I think that the traditional musicians are also playing, Western classical music or popular music. And so I think the younger musicians, I've seen them, like I went to a salsa night and it was a salsa band with a masinko playing as well. So I think they're trying to figure it out. I think how to make it better, or the way it's going to get more together is by the musicians themselves kind of doing it. Yeah, I think it's something that just kind of comes out of the ideas and just working it out in rehearsals. I don't think there's an easy way to think about it, except that we just kind of support musicians who are trying and see what they're going to create. Because it's pretty tricky to bring these two things together. But people are doing it, so I don't have a strong answer, but I would love to see more of that as well. And I know like Ethiopians and Rastafari they want to see more of that as well. Yeah, I think it will happen. Thank you.
I must first thank you for the work that you have done.
Thank you.
It's very important for us to hear that presentation. It even highlighted what Jerry just said a while ago. One question I want to ask. Your speech is not much Jamaican. Right, because if you listen carefully how I speak,
right, yeah.
We speak slowly. And I don't know if it's because of your involvement in the music why you speak that quickly.
Oh, it was fast, sorry.
Yes, it does. It is. I've recorded it because I want to hear it again.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Was it the question?
No, it's not a question. I'm asking if you have recognized your speech. Okay.
You're asking me where I'm from?
No, you're from Jamaica.
Yes. But I've lived in different places, so the accent going to...
No, not accent, it's the speech.
Oh, just I talk too fast. Oh, sorry. Oh, sorry. Oh, sorry.
Final point or question. One, you mentioned Teddy Afro. I met Teddy Afro in New York. And, you know, I realized you were talking about the touchy subject of the divinity of His Majesty. But Teddy was very much a monarchist.
Yes.
And in fact, he was harassed by the Ethiopian government for a long time. I mean, I met him while he was in a sort of self-imposed exile in New York. But I'm curious also, recently, Dubwise, Protégé, and others kept a concert in Addis Ababa. Huge crowds, large turnout, unapologetically Rastafari. And I was amazed to see them having the young Ethiopians chanting Rastafari. I mean, it was wonderful. You know, if we're talking about the music, and if I don't know if you were there for that, but
I went to Chronics.
It definitely shows a whole switch or a whole progression in the attitude and the way Ethiopians are embracing. And there is, in fact, now a generation of Ethiopian Rastafari, both in Ethiopia and outside Ethiopia, who I think their influence has a lot to do with embracing this younger generation of reggae artists, you know? I don't think you would see any shows like that in the 70s when people like Skill Cole and others were living there, you know?
That's very important. I noticed that too. When Chronics came to Addis Ababa, I went to that concert, and you know, lots of young people were out there with the Lion of Judah flags waving, and that's not really something that you see a lot in Ethiopia. For a long time, people believed that that flag was illegal. Well, you're not supposed to fly that because the Lion of Judah flag that we're familiar with, that's the flag of the monarchy. The new government is a new regime, it's a new system. So if you are flying that, you're a monarchist, and you're against the government. That's kind of the idea. But people are flying it more now. I think Rastafari, Repatriates are showing that it's possible, and so the Ethiopian youth are taking onto it. And some of them really, they're learning about Haile Selassie, and they actually like what they hear, they like what they're learning. So yeah, and Protégé, Chronics, these performers who come there also are energizing the movement as well. So I think that's a very important point, for sure. Thank you. Okay.
Yeah. I'm sorry I didn't get to hear your earlier presentation, but I would like to go back to the early days in Shashamane in the 70s. I don't know if you were briefed when you went there about what transpired in the early days. During the time of the Derg, I was fortunate to be there, or if you want to say unfortunate, but I think it was fortunate to be there. This was about 1976. As a matter of fact, I arrived in Ethiopia on Christmas night. During the time of, it was unbelievable. There was a curfew at 7 o'clock in the night in Addis Ababa. As a matter of fact, the first night I went there, I almost ended up in the jail because we went to the Gian, and Gian.
Yes.
And then it was going about 6:30 in the afternoon, so in the night, and we said we wanted to go to the palace, to know where the palace was and to take some photographs. So I went along what they call it. It was they call it Revolution Square. After the revolution. It was before it was Mascal Square.
Mascal, okay.
So I ventured around to the palace and took my camera and flash. And some soldiers came out. Soldiers came out with some big AK. And they said, what are you doing here? So I said, I said, Faringi.
Yes.
So one of the general, I think it was a general, came out and he spoke English, and I was telling him, I said, Rastafari come the first time and things like that, and I want to take a photograph of the thing. He said, those things are not allowed in revolution in Ethiopia, but it is very serious times, and you have to be very careful. And fortunately for me now, he came out on the road and he waved on it was a Benz, the flag was flying. Fortunately, it was the ambassador for Kenya. And they stopped him and we spoke, and he said, okay. So he said to me, where are you from? I said, he said, oh, Rastafari from Jamaica. I said, yes. So he started to talk. I remember when I went to the car with him, he was taking me he was telling me about, first thing he said to me was, oh, Michael Manley, Democratic Socialist. I said, oh my God. I said, yes, good. So I said, I'm good. So he was telling me what is happening in the country. He briefed me and took it again. But after that, the next one I make sure I got on the first was Edith Shashamane. But in those days, Shashamane was as a community with about, I can tell you the name of the people who were living there at that time. It was a brother called Robinson. He was from out of Chicago, from the Federation.
Right,
There was Gladstone, and there was a fellow by the name of Hillman. He was an American. He was an evangelist, I think he was, or something like that. And there was Dyer, who, if you know the history of the land, Dyer was the first guy who hitchhiked from England all the way to Shashamane.
Right.
That's a movie if you get the history of that.
Absolutely.
There was Bar Steiners who came there from from East Kingston, Douglas Mack and Sam Brown, Sam Clean, I can't answer that. And then you had also Pilot, who was, Pilot lived in England at that time. And you had now Dyer, who came from the Solomon Wolf organization. It was sort of their charter from Charter 33 from Waterhouse. And the rest of the people, if I miss it, there was a brother called Brother Vin. I don't think you know of him. He passed out, but those were the early settlers. Brother Vin, Dyer, Bar, and there was the 12 tribe brethren. We had 1, 2, 3, about 4 houses at that time, and you had those 4 houses were there. The headquarters was just a little, what do you call it, 2-bedroom thing.
Yes.
And it was like about 7 of the brothers. And then you had on the other side, on the same side beside Bar, you had Gwen, who was from the 12 tribes. Then you had Desai. You met Desai.
I know them, yes.
And you met Donald Leach, the guy who wrote Zimbabwe. You passed away before you went there. Flipping,
yeah,
that's right. Yeah. You probably saw his son, because his son is now a bank manager there.
Yes.
Yeah. And then you had Harvard Core.
Yes.
Levi on the next side with Diane and some other brothers. But what I want to get to inform you about is that those days, the land was something that people just drive past. The diplomats used to drive on the weekend. You say going down no, not to Kenya. They will go to Awasa. Some of them would stop at Langano. But it was like people were passing the community. They didn't know, they knew that Rastaman was there,
right,
but they didn't really got involved. And Ethiopians didn't really come there apart from the ones who lived at Malkoda. They passed through and interact with the brothers. But at that time, no job was given to none of the brothers that were there. Only person that was fortunate to get work was Ivan and myself. We were the only person on the land at that time that were employed. Core was going to university, and when they closed down the school it was about 3 years, I think it was. Core managed to start tutoring in outside of Saddam. I can't remember the name, Negeli. I fortunately went to a game on the Sunday with some brothers down in Saddam. They were called Ethiopia. Take them. Ethiopia first. That was the slogan at that time.
Yeah.
So we went to this game in Awasa. A football game. Myself, Donald Leach, Pilot, Desai, Brother Bonnie, and who you met him, and Desi. So when we went to this game now, I was surprised. There were so many people there. After the game, we had this thing about us that when in the revolution in Ethiopia at that time, we had to stay together. Please don't stray.
Mm-hmm.
So after the game finished, we were in a corner waiting, and this big crowd is coming. We can't find Pilot. But Pilot was this type of individual that he went anywhere. When he talked with such a commanding voice that people listened to him. So when we were there, we saw the crowd coming, and we said to ourselves, "Where is Pilot?" We can't see Pilot. Well, the crowd petered down, got smaller and smaller, and we see this guy coming with these military entourage behind him. We start touching one another and say, "What is this? Everybody going to jail now?" So Pilot came up with a young guy who was supposed to be the commissioner for sport in the Sidama region. So pilot brought these guys coming up to me and we standing up there. We started to get a little bit nervous, honestly speaking. So pilot came there and he pointed at me and said, this man, I want this man to come and coach your team. I was in a frenzy because I was coaching at that time, I was playing. So pilot brought the guy with his general and they said, you know, we're playing. They had lost, Saddam had lost the game. So pilot said to the young commissioner at that time, said, I want to introduce you to this man because we think he can coach a team. Anyway, the commissioner came to a young guy, he was about 24, his name was Seifu Yaman, and I'll forget his name. Oh. You don't know him, he went to jail after the change, after the fell, he went. So anyway, he came to me and he said, we would like to employ you. I said, for what? Can you coach my team for me? Because we have a return game in 6 weeks' time in a place called Gomogofa. And Gomogofa is about 1,200 kilometers, I think it's north of Saddam. So I decided to take on the challenge. So he said to me, I said to him, if you can get all these guys from the different towns to be housed in one place, in 6 weeks' time, I think we can beat that team. But the story was that I got employed as the second Jamaican to be employed there. But what I want to get to let you know now, how the land became a little bit renowned now. There were a lot of diplomats, Canadian diplomats, working in Saddam on a project, an agricultural project. You want to say something?
Right. Could we respectfully, could we continue the conversation after we've ended this session of the program?
But I think the people would like to know.
So what we will continue the conversations after we've closed.
Well, I don't think I'm in the position to continue after you. If you're going to stop me now, it's going to be the end of it. I will discontinue.
All right.
If you want to do that, I will discontinue.
All right, thank you. In the interest of time, audience, we have to end at 2 p.m. sharp, and it's over 2 p.m. No?
Let me ask it.
Who?
Gabriel, let him ask it and I can...
So I'll just take one more question, sir. Okay.
Yeah, greetings, Dr. Aaron. We met in Addis Ababa a couple years back, right? Okay, so thank you for this presentation. It was very informative, very intriguing, and thank you for your development and stuff. Okay, so we know reggae music as a music of protest, right? Popular reggae singers sing about inequality, injustice, and all those type of things. It's a very radical genre of music. I'm sure a lot of people can agree with that. I'm just wondering, the Ethiopian reggae musician, could you tell us the extent to which their messages are in line or intrinsic with the popular reggae radical vibrations?
Yes. How much time I have? Less than a minute. All right, I don't have time, but that's a great question. Teddy Afro is the main one who I know. Ja Yasti Serial is his major song that he sang, that people interpret it as a critique of the government, but he was being very smart about it. He went to jail shortly after that song came out. People thought that it was because of that song why the government put him in jail. So not many Ethiopians really want to do that because they saw what happened with him. So it happens, but people have to be very careful. That's my short answer. I'd love to talk more.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, let me announce that we have a special Ethiopian coffee ceremony upstairs for you and also refreshments, so you're welcome to that afterwards. Is there another burning question? The question? All right, less than a minute. We have less than a minute, yes.
Yes, not really a question. I did just want to put a point across pertaining to a lot of things that I hear. I mean, everybody say everything, but there's a lot of people living in Shashamane, repatriated, having struggles because,
Yes.
food, money, living, job, this. Most of these descendants are from slavery, who fight the struggle for slavery, for reparation, so we could have a better life. We've seen this money has been allocated to our government, about 600 billions or more, and we have learned that this money is going to build more schools and boom. I'm saying these Africans who repatriated, if somebody can just consider them, I mean the people them are Shashamane, and also some of the Rasta them here too, who want to repatriate home but can't find the means. So I think to the Minister of Culture, Youth Development, the Diaspora Africa consideration, because you can't be so wicked when none of us, you understand?
Yeah.
So modern time now, we should open our heart and do something what we have to do, what we should do and must do. Thank you, sir.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
I now invite Mrs. Marilyn Delisser to deliver the vote of thanks.
Good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of the Director of the African Caribbean Institute of Jamaica, Jamaica Memory Bank, Dr. Kurt Henry, and the staff, I would like to thank our presenter, Dr. David Aarons, ethnomusicologist and lecturer at the University of North Carolina at Greensboro, for his very enlightening, informative, and entertaining lecture. Africa is our home. Reggae music and Rastafari Repatriates in Ethiopia. We now invite Dr. Kurt Henry to present a gift to Dr. Aarons.
Thank you. And let me now invite Mrs. Judith Hilton, Mr. Leslie Harrow, along with Mrs. Buckner to make this presentation. Dr. Aarons? All right, so we, of course, want to thank everyone, guests, everyone who've made this possible. At this time, I now invite all of you upstairs for a special Ethiopian coffee ceremony and refreshments. Thank you.
Yes, the time has come. Black man, you're going home. 7 miles of Black Star Liners coming in the harbor. 7 miles of Black Star Liners coming in the harbor. I can see them coming. I can see hydrants running. I can hear the elders sing. These are the days for which we've been praying. 7 miles of Black Star Liners coming in the harbor. 7 miles of Black Star Liners coming in the harbor. Marcus Garvey told us freedom is a must. He told us that the Black Star Liners are coming one day for us. 7 miles of Black Star Liners coming in the harbor. 7 miles of Black Star Liners coming in the harbor. 7 miles of Black Star Liners. 7 miles of Black Star Liners. 7 miles of Black Star Liners coming, 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 coming. I saw Rastafari sitting on his throne in Mount Zion. Mount Zion, yeah, the lamb that was slain came and took a book out of his hand and bowed before his throne. And the 7 angels, all dressed in white, were around the throne in Mount Zion. When the angels saw I and I coming, they asked, who are these people? To answer them saying, these are those